The Scavenger and the Arrival. The night was silent, except for the distant hum of broken machines and the occasional howl of the wind. The world had changed long ago. Cities were now just ruins, covered in dust and forgotten by time. The sky, once filled with bright lights, was now home to distant alien ships that sometimes passed like shadows. Jack was a scavenger, nothing more. He lived by collecting scraps from the old world. Broken metal, dead batteries, anything useful. Every morning, he searched through the ruins, and every night, he traded his findings for food and water. It was a hard life, but he had no other choice. Tonight, he was searching near an abandoned highway, his flashlight flickering in the darkness. He moved carefully, knowing that danger was always nearby. Wild creatures, rogue robots, or worse, other scavengers who wouldn't think twice before killing for supplies. Then suddenly, the sky ripped apart. A blinding streak of fire shot across the sky, heading straight down. Jack froze, watching as the object crashed with a thunderous roar, shaking the ground beneath his feet. A cloud of smoke and dust rose from the impact site, not too far from where he stood. Jack's heart pounded. He had seen debris fall from the sky before, old satellites, wrecked alien ships, but something about this felt different. He hesitated, then tightened his grip on his bag and started moving toward the crash. The wreckage. Reaching the crash site, Jack pulled his scarf over his nose to block out the smoke. A deep crater had formed in the ground, glowing with heat. At the center lay a strange metallic pod, half buried in the dirt. The surface was covered in alien markings, pulsing faintly with blue light. Jack's instincts screamed at him to leave. This wasn't normal wreckage. It was alive. But curiosity was stronger. He took slow steps toward the pod, reaching out cautiously. Before he could touch it, the pod hissed, and a section of the metal slid open. Jack jumped back, pulling out the rusted knife he always carried. Then something moved inside. A figure stumbled out, falling onto the dirt. Jack took another step back, his grip tightening on the knife. The figure groaned, struggling to get up. Not human. Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was an alien warrior. The warrior. The alien was tall, at least 7 feet, with dark blue skin and sharp ridges along his arms. His armor was cracked and burned, and deep wounds covered his body. His breathing was ragged, his eyes half open. Jack had seen aliens before, but never one like this. This one looked powerful, but also desperate. The alien's gaze locked onto Jack, and with surprising speed, he grabbed Jack's wrist. Jack tensed, ready to fight, but the alien's grip was weak. With great effort, the alien spoke, his voice deep and rough. "They are coming. Help me, and we both live." Jack's mind raced. Who was coming? Was this alien a threat, or was something worse chasing him? Before he could respond, a sudden whirring noise echoed in the distance. Jack turned his head sharply. Drones. Small flying machines with red scanning lights, moving fast. Jack's stomach tightened. He had seen these before. These drones belonged to the Enforcers, an alien force that hunted survivors and wiped out threats. Jack looked down at the wounded alien. If the Enforcers found him here, they'd assume Jack was helping him. And they didn't ask questions. They just killed. The alien's grip on Jack's wrist loosened as he fell back, too weak to stay up. His breathing was shallow. Jack cursed under his breath. He didn't owe this alien anything. He could leave him here, let the Enforcers take him. That would be the safest choice. But then he saw something in the alien's eyes, a plea, a silent desperation. Jack wasn't a hero. He was just a scavenger. But something deep inside told him that if he walked away now, he would regret it forever. He sighed, then bent down and grabbed the alien's arm. "Come on," Jack muttered, pulling the warrior up. "We need to move." The alien's weight was heavy, almost too much for Jack to handle, but he forced himself to move, dragging the warrior toward the nearest cover. Behind them, The drones changed direction, heading straight toward the crash site. Jack gritted his teeth. This was a bad idea. A very bad idea. But it was too late to turn back now. The hunter becomes the hunted. The wind carried the scent of burning metal and scorched earth as Jack stumbled through the ruins, half dragging, half carrying the wounded alien warrior. His breath came in ragged gasps, his arms screaming from the weight of the massive creature leaning against him. Behind them, the distant whirring of drones grew louder, their scanning lights cutting through the darkness. Jack's mind raced. What the hell am I doing? He had spent years avoiding trouble, keeping his head down, scavenging just enough to survive. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a man trying to make it through another day. But now he was running for his life with an injured alien warrior at his side, an alien who had whispered a warning before collapsing. They are coming. Help me, and we both live. Who were they? The enforcers? Some other alien threat? Jack didn't know. All he knew was that if those drones found them, they were both dead. Nowhere to hide. Jack dragged the alien behind a half-collapsed wall, pressing his back against the cold stone. He forced himself to breathe quietly, listening. The drones were close now, their mechanical voices speaking in a language Jack didn't understand. The alien stirred, his breathing shallow but urgent. He muttered something in a rough, guttural voice, then winced in pain. Jack glanced at him. You better not be saying your last words, big guy, 'cause if you die, I just risked my ass for nothing. The alien grunted, a sound that almost sounded like a weak chuckle. He opened his mouth, struggling to speak. Weapon. In the wreckage. Meet it. Jack clenched his jaw. Yeah. Well, unless you got a magic trick to make us invisible, we ain't getting back there. The alien closed his eyes for a moment, then took a deep breath. When he opened them again, there was a flicker of determination. He reached down to a small device on his belt and pressed something. Suddenly, the air around them shimmered. Jack gasped, watching as his own hands seemed to blur and fade. The alien had activated some kind of cloaking field. You could have used this earlier, Jack hissed. Only. Once. The alien rasped. Short. Time. Jack didn't waste another second. He gripped the warrior's arm and pulled him forward, moving fast but careful. The cloaking field flickered slightly, and Jack realized that if they moved too quickly, they would become visible again. The drones hovered above, scanning the area where they had been just moments ago. Come on, don't look down, Jack whispered under his breath. Step by step, they crept through the ruins, staying low, avoiding the drone lights. The cloaking field was holding, but Jack could feel the heat from the device on the alien's belt. It's overheating, Jack realized. If it failed before they got to safety, they were dead. A narrow escape. The ground beneath Jack's boots suddenly shifted, a loose rock tumbling down the rubble. The sound was small, barely noticeable, but to the drones, it was enough. Alert det. Ski-aning. Jack's breath caught in his throat as the nearest drone turned toward them. Damn it. The cloaking field flickered, failing for a split second. The drone's red light passed over Jack's foot, but before it could lock on, the alien warrior made a guttural clicking sound, pressing something on his armor. A bright holographic decoy appeared 20 feet away, an image of two running figures. The drone instantly shifted focus and took off in pursuit of the fake targets. Jack didn't wait to see if it worked. He grabbed the alien and ran. The cloaking field finally failed completely, the air rippling as they became visible again. Damn thing's out of juice, Jack muttered. We need real cover. A desperate shelter. Jack spotted a half-buried structure ahead. An old underground storage bunker. If they could get inside, they could regroup, hide, and figure out their next move. With the last of his strength, Jack helped the alien inside, shoving the metal door shut behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole. Jack collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. He could still hear the drones outside, scanning, searching. Beside him, the alien warrior groaned in pain, his head slumping forward. Jack reached into his bag, pulled out a battered old flashlight, and clicked it on. The weak yellow beam illuminated the warrior's face. He looked worse than before. His armor was cracked, and his wounds were bleeding dark blue. Jack sighed, rubbing his face. "Guess I better patch you up before you bleed all over the damn place." He pulled out an old medkit, one of his best scavenged finds, and started working. The alien watched him silently, his breathing heavy. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "You saved me." Jack snorted. "Yeah, well, I figured if you died, I'd have no one to complain to about this mess." The alien actually smiled, though it was weak. "My name is Korak," he said. "I owe you my life." Jack paused for a second, then shook his head. "Don't thank me yet, big guy. We're not out of this mess." Outside, the distant hum of enforcer ships filled the night sky. Jack knew one thing for sure. The hunter had become the hunted. And the worst was yet to come. A deal with a warrior. The bunker was cold and dark, the air thick with dust and the scent of old metal. The only light came from Jack's flickering flashlight, casting long shadows on the walls. He knelt beside Korak, the injured alien warrior, whose breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. Jack had seen people die before, too many times. Out here, in the ruins of Earth, death was just part of life. But something about Korak's struggle bothered him. This wasn't just some random alien. This guy had crashed here, injured, alone, and was being hunted. That meant he was important. Jack tightened the bandage around Korak's arm, trying to stop the dark blue blood from spilling any further. The warrior gritted his teeth, his body tense with pain but silent. No screams, no complaints. Jack respected that. "All right, big guy," Jack muttered, sitting back. "I did my part. You're not bleeding out anymore." Korak slowly lifted his head, his golden eyes locking onto Jack's. "Why? Help me?" he asked, his voice still weak. Jack shrugged. Call it a bad habit. Truth was, Jack didn't really know. Maybe it was the way Korak had looked at him back at the crash site, a silent plea in his eyes. Maybe it was because, deep down, Jack was tired of just surviving. Tired of watching the world rot while the enforcers ruled the sky. Or maybe, just maybe, he saw something in Korak that reminded him of himself. Alone, fighting against something too big to win against. Korak let out a slow breath. "I should be dead," he murmured. "But you changed my fate." Jack smirked. "Yeah, well, don't get all sentimental. You're still breathing, so we gotta figure out what happens next." A warrior's truth. Korak struggled to sit up, wincing as his wounds protested. "They will come," he said. "More than drones. More than scouts. They will not stop until I am dead." Jack frowned. "Who?" "The enforcers." Korak shook his head. "Not just them. The ones they serve. The High Order." Jack had heard whispers of that name before, spoken in hushed voices among scavengers. No one really knew what the High Order was, only that they were the true rulers of the enforcers, the unseen force behind Earth's destruction. "Why are they after you?" Jack asked. Korak exhaled slowly. "Because I was once one of them." Jack's stomach tightened. He moved back slightly, his instincts screaming danger. "You're telling me you were an enforcer?" Korak shook his head again, his gaze sharp but tired. "Not an enforcer. Something more. I was a blade of the High Order, one of their elite warriors." Jack cursed under his breath. This wasn't just some random fugitive alien. This guy had been one of the monsters that ruled over Earth. "So let me get this straight," Jack said, crossing his arms. "You used to work for the people that destroyed my planet, and now you want me to help you." Korak didn't flinch. I served them. Until I learned the truth. His eyes darkened. Until I saw what they truly were. Jack studied him, looking for any sign of lies or manipulation. But all he saw was something else. Guilt. Regret. A warrior's burden. Why'd you turn against them? Jack asked after a long pause. Korak clenched his jaw. Because they are not just conquerors. They are something far worse. They do not take planets for power or resources. He took a shaky breath. They take them to erase them. Jack's skin prickled. Erase. Korak met his eyes. They do not enslave. They do not rule. They take entire civilizations and make sure they are forgotten, as if they never existed. Jack's stomach dropped. He had always thought the Enforcers were just another group of alien invaders, taking control of Earth for their own purposes. But if what Korak was saying was true, the High Order wasn't just here to rule. They were here to wipe humanity from history itself. A dangerous deal. Jack let out a slow breath. All right, so let's say I believe you. What do you want from me? Korak's gaze was steady. Help me repair my weapon. Help me survive. And in return, he paused. I will give you the power to fight back. Jack let out a short, bitter laugh. Fight back? Are you kidding me? He gestured around. Look at me, man. I'm just a scavenger. I don't have an army. I don't even have a damned ship. Korak's expression didn't change. You do not need an army. He placed a small metallic device in Jack's hand. Jack looked down at it. It was a thin, alien-looking chip, pulsing faintly with blue light. What is this? Jack asked, turning it over in his fingers. Korak leaned forward. It is knowledge. It holds information that the High Order does not want anyone to know. Locations, weapons, weaknesses, everything. Jack stared at the device. If Korak was telling the truth, this wasn't just some fugitive alien warrior. This was a man who held secrets that could shake the High Order to its core. Jack swallowed hard. He had spent years hiding, avoiding trouble, scraping by with just enough to survive. He had never thought about fighting back. But now, the universe had thrown something huge into his hands. A choice. Korak studied him. You saved me, he said. Now I offer you a chance to save your people. Jack looked at the device, then at the warrior sitting before him. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something other than just survival. Purpose. Jack closed his fist around the device. Fine, he said. I'm in. But outside, hidden in the shadows, something watched them. A small mechanical drone, barely the size of a hand, clung to the wall of the bunker. Its red eye blinked, recording every word. And somewhere, far away, a signal was sent. The hunters had found their prey. The enemy strikes first. The bunker's air was stale, thick with dust, and the scent of rusted metal. Jack sat against the cold wall, the small alien device still clutched in his hand. The pulsing blue light from it felt too bright, too alive, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. Across from him, Korak leaned against the metal crates, his breathing steady but labored. His wounds were still healing, and despite his strength, Jack could tell he wasn't ready for another fight. Not yet. Jack exhaled and ran a hand through his messy, dust-covered hair. All right, he said. So we got some kind of super-secret alien chip that could apparently bring down the biggest empire in the universe. And let me guess, if the High Order finds out I have it, I'm as good as dead. Korak gave him a weak nod. Not just you. Anyone who stands beside you. Jack snorted. Well, that's comforting. He was about to ask more when a sharp beeping sound filled the bunker. Korak's head snapped up, his eyes burning with alertness. Jack frowned. What the hell is that? Then he saw it. A small blinking red light in the corner of the bunker, attached to a tiny drone. Jack's stomach dropped. They had been found. A desperate escape. Korak moved before Jack could even react. Despite his injuries, the alien warrior lunged forward, ripping the drone from the wall and crushing it in his fist. The small machine sparked and crumpled, but the damage was already done. Jack cursed. "Damn it. They know we're here." Korak's expression was grim. "Then we must move. Now." Jack scrambled to his feet, slinging his scavenger bag over his shoulder. "All right, genius, where do we go? You can barely walk." Before Korak could answer, a deep, rumbling vibration shook the bunker walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. A distant explosion sent a shockwave through the air. Then, a voice. Cold, mechanical, inhuman. "Scanning. Targetes ilocate. Execute mmeda. Hedawat." Jack's pulse spiked. Outside, the sky turned red as Enforcer dropships descended from the clouds. Metal boots hit the ground, marching in perfect, synchronized rhythm. The high-order soldiers were here. And they were here to kill. The Enforcer assault. Jack barely had time to react before the first explosion hit. The bunker's entrance was ripped apart, metal shrapnel flying in every direction. Jack hit the ground, covering his head as heat and smoke filled the air. His ears rang, his vision blurred. Through the dust, he saw them. 6 Enforcers, towering black-armored soldiers, their faces hidden behind sleek metal visors, their energy rifles raised and aimed directly at him. One of them, clearly the leader, stepped forward, his voice echoing through his helmet. "The fugitive Korak is to be eliminated. The human scavenger is of no consequence." Jack's blood ran cold. "Of no consequence," he muttered under his breath. "Oh, hell no." Then, before the Enforcers could fire, Korak moved. Even wounded, weakened, bleeding, the alien warrior was a force of nature. With a deep, guttural growl, he ripped a metal beam from the wreckage and swung it with the strength of a beast. The beam slammed into the nearest Enforcer, sending the soldier crashing into the wall. The others reacted instantly, their rifles lighting up with blinding blue energy blasts. Jack barely had time to duck. The heat singed the air above his head. "Korak, we are so outnumbered," Jack yelled. Korak didn't answer. He was already moving, his instincts honed from years of war. He tackled another Enforcer, snapping the soldier's rifle in half with nothing but brute force. Jack's heart pounded. If he didn't do something, they were both dead. Jack's first kill. Then, Jack's eyes fell on one of the fallen Enforcer's rifles. It was still active, still charged. Jack dove forward, rolling over broken debris, and grabbed the weapon. It was heavier than he expected, humming with unfamiliar alien energy. His fingers curled around the trigger. An Enforcer turned toward him, raising his rifle. Jack fired. The blue energy blast hit the soldier square in the chest. For a split second, Jack thought it wouldn't work. That maybe Enforcer armor was too strong. Then the soldier's body jerked violently before he collapsed. Dead. Jack froze. He had never killed someone before. Never. His breath came in short gasps, his hands shaking. "Jack!" Korak's voice snapped him out of it. Jack turned just in time to see another Enforcer charging toward him. Jack didn't hesitate. He fired again. The second soldier dropped. Something inside Jack shifted. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was a fight, and if he didn't step up, he would never live long enough to regret it. A daring escape. Korak fought like a warrior possessed, but even he couldn't hold them off forever. More Enforcers were coming. Too many. Jack made a split-second decision. "We can't win this," he shouted. "We need to run." Korak hesitated, but then nodded sharply. Jack grabbed a grenade from the Enforcer's belt, pulled the pin, and threw it behind them. "Move E," he yelled. The explosion tore through the bunker, sending shockwaves through the air. Jack and Korak bolted through the chaos, pushing forward as debris rained around them. Somehow, They made it outside. The night sky was filled with red warning lights, the enforcer ships scanning the ground. They had only seconds before they were spotted again. Jack turned to Korak, breathing hard. "Where do we go?" Korak, still gripping his injured side, pointed east. "There is an old resistance outpost in the mountains. If we reach it, we stand a chance." Jack nodded. No more questions. No more hesitation. They ran. The war had just begun. As they disappeared into the ruins, the enforcer commander stepped forward, watching them escape. His visor glowed with cold red light. Then he turned to one of his soldiers. "Activate the hunters," he ordered. The soldier hesitated. "Sir, the hunters have not been deployed on this planet before. They err." The commander's voice turned sharp. "I do not care. The fugitive must not escape. The scavenger must die." The soldier hesitated for only a moment longer, then pressed a button on his wrist. Far above Earth, something stirred. Something not human. Something worse, awakening the warrior within. The night air was cold and sharp, cutting against Jack's skin as he ran. His breath came in short gasps, his boots kicking up dust and debris as he and Korak moved through the ruins. Behind them, the distant glow of enforcer searchlights scanned the wreckage of the bunker. The sky pulsed with red warning signals, and somewhere above, the hunters had been deployed. Jack didn't know what the hunters were, but from the way Korak had gone dead silent at the mention of their name, he knew one thing. They were worse than anything they had faced so far. The journey to the mountains. The two moved quickly, following Korak's lead. The warrior, despite his wounds, barely slowed. His training, his sheer willpower, kept him going. Jack, on the other hand, was struggling. His lungs burned. His legs ached. His mind was racing. For years, he had survived by being invisible, by staying out of trouble, by avoiding risks. And now, he had killed. He had picked up an enforcer rifle, aimed, and pulled the trigger. And the worst part, it hadn't felt wrong. It had felt necessary. Jack clenched his fists as they approached a rocky hill, the jagged remains of an old highway stretching out before them. The road was cracked and broken, leading toward the distant mountains Korak had spoken of. "How far is this outpost?" Jack panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. Korak glanced at him, his golden eyes unreadable. "1 day's journey," he said, "if we move quickly." Jack groaned. "Yeah, well, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not exactly built for marathons." Korak didn't slow. "Then you must adapt." Jack was about to snap back when he felt something. A shift in the air. A sudden, unnatural silence. Korak stopped too. His body tensed. Jack swallowed. "What is it?" Korak didn't answer. Then, a distant howl, low, metallic, not human. Jack's pulse spiked. "Tell me that was just the wind." Korak slowly reached for his blade. "No," he said. "They have found us. The hunters arrive." From the ruins behind them, dark figures emerged. At first, they looked like shadows, moving unnaturally fast, shifting through the wreckage like ghosts. Then the moonlight caught them, and Jack felt his stomach turn to ice. They weren't enforcers. They were something else. Tall, thin, twisted. Their bodies were part flesh, part machine, their elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. Their faces were featureless metal masks, glowing with a single red light where eyes should be. And they moved without sound. Korak took a slow step back. "Hunters," he said. His voice was calm, but Jack could hear the underlying tension. Jack's throat went dry. "How do we kill them?" Korak exhaled. "You don't." Jack blinked. "Great. Fantastic. Love that answer." The lead hunter tilted its head, studying them, calculating. Then, it vanished. Jack's eyes widened. Where the hell did it? Before he could finish, it was on him. Jack's first real fight. The hunter moved like lightning, appearing in front of Jack in less than a second. Its clawed hand lashed out, aiming straight for his throat. Jack barely had time to react. He threw himself backward, rolling across the cracked pavement as the hunter's claws sliced through the air where his head had been. Before he could recover, another hunter lunged at him from the side. Jack raised the stolen Enforcer rifle and fired on instinct. The energy blast hit the hunter square in the chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, its metallic skin rippled, absorbing the impact. The hunter's head snapped toward Jack. It tilted its head and smiled. Jack's blood turned ice cold. Korak. Little help here. Korak was already moving. With a battle cry, the alien warrior rushed forward, his energy blade igniting in his hands. He swung it in a perfect arc, slicing clean through the first hunter's arm. For the first time, the hunter screeched, a horrible, unnatural sound. But it didn't fall. Jack scrambled backward, raising his rifle again. You want to tell me how the hell we're supposed to kill these things? Korak didn't take his eyes off the hunters. They are not alive, he said. They are weapons, designed for one purpose: hunting fugitives. Jack gritted his teeth. Yeah, I got that part. What I need to know is how to stop them. Korak blocked another hunter's strike, pushing it back. Their core, he said. It is in their spine. You must break it. Jack's eyes snapped toward the hunter closest to him. The spine. All right. Fine. Let's see if this works. Jack becomes the hunter. The hunter lunged at him again, its clawed fingers reaching for his throat. Jack sidestepped at the last second, barely avoiding the strike. He gripped his rifle tight, flipping it like a club, and swung it hard into the hunter's back. The impact sent a crackling shockwave through the hunter's body. For a split second, it froze. Jack didn't waste time. He dropped the rifle, grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the ground, and drove it into the hunter's spine. The creature let out a horrible digital scream, then collapsed. Jack panted, staring at the fallen hunter. He had done it. He had killed a hunter. Korak, still locked in combat, glanced at him. For the first time, Jack saw something new in the warrior's eyes. Respect. But there was no time to celebrate. More hunters were coming. Korak grabbed Jack's shoulder. We must go. Now. Jack took a shaky breath, nodding. No hesitation. No questions. They turned and ran toward the mountains. The warrior awakens. As they disappeared into the darkness, Jack knew one thing. He was no longer just a scavenger. He was becoming something else. A fighter. A survivor. A warrior. And if the High Order wanted him dead, they were going to have to work for it. Betrayal and truth. The night stretched endlessly as Jack and Korak raced toward the mountains, their breath sharp in the freezing air. Behind them, the ruins of the old world echoed with the distant howls of the hunters. Jack's legs felt like lead, every muscle screaming in protest. His hands were still shaking from the fight. His mind was still replaying the kill, the moment he had driven a piece of jagged metal straight into the spine of one of those things he had killed before. But this was different. This time, he hadn't been just surviving. He had been fighting back. And the worst part, it had felt right. Korak moved beside him, his golden eyes sharp, scanning the horizon. The warrior had barely spoken since their escape. His wounds were healing, but there was something else in his expression now. Something Jack didn't like. A wait. A hesitation. Jack had learned to read people in this broken world. And Korak. He was hiding something. The hidden path. The two climbed over jagged rocks, the cracked remnants of an ancient road leading into the mountains. The higher they went, the colder it became. The ruins of old vehicles, rusted skeletons of cars and transport rigs, lined the path, half buried in frost and dust. Jack hugged his jacket close, his breath visible in the air. How much farther? He panted. Korak didn't look back. Close, he said. The resistance outpost is hidden beyond the next ridge. Jack exhaled, trying to ignore the exhaustion creeping into his bones. Then, a sound. Soft, almost too quiet to notice. Jack stopped walking. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Korak froze. His hand instinctively went to his weapon. His posture shifted, battle-ready. Silence. Then, a footstep. Not theirs. Jack spun around, raising his stolen enforcer rifle. And then a voice rang out. "Easy there, kid." Jack's heart nearly stopped, because standing before them, stepping out from the shadows of the ruins, was a man Jack knew. A man he had thought was long dead, a ghost from the past. "Ronan?" Jack whispered. The man grinned, stepping forward. Ronan was tall, lean, and sharp-eyed, with a face that was equal parts rogue and survivor. His clothes were a mix of old-world scavenger gear and high-tech enforcer armor, stitched together in a way that made no sense. A long rifle was slung over his back, and a blade rested at his side. Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. He hadn't seen Ronan in 3 years. Back then, they had been scavengers together, working in the same faction, searching the ruins for whatever scraps of tech could be traded for food. They had survived together, until the day Ronan had vanished without a trace. Jack had assumed he was dead. Clearly, he wasn't. "Still breathing, huh?" Ronan said, smirking. "Never thought I'd see your sorry face again." Jack's grip on his rifle tightened. "What the hell are you doing here?" Ronan's smirk faded slightly. His gaze flicked to Korak, studying the alien warrior with careful interest. "You got yourself into some serious trouble, kid," Ronan said. "You have no idea what you're carrying." Jack's stomach churned. He knew. Somehow, Ronan knew about the device. Korak stepped forward, his eyes cold. "Who is this?" Jack hesitated. "An old friend," he muttered. "At least, I thought he was." "The truth comes out." Ronan sighed. "Jack, listen to me. That thing Korak gave you. That little alien chip in your pocket." He took a slow step forward, lowering his voice. "That thing is a death sentence." Jack narrowed his eyes. "I already figured that out." "No," Ronan said. "You really haven't." His expression turned serious. "That device, it doesn't just have information. It holds an override key to the High Order's entire war network. If you get it to the right people, you could shut down every enforcer ship in the system." Jack's pulse spiked. He had expected the device to be important, but not like this. Korak was silent. He had known. Of course, he had known. Jack clenched his jaw. "Why are you telling me this, Ronan?" Ronan's jaw tensed, and Jack saw it. That flicker, that hesitation, the lie. Jack moved fast. He grabbed his rifle and aimed it directly at Ronan's head. "You sold us out, didn't you?" Jack said, his voice low and deadly. Ronan exhaled. "It's not like that, kid." Korak growled, his hand tightening on his blade. "Then what is it like?" Jack's heart was hammering. He had trusted Ronan once, and now, here he was, standing in the perfect spot, at the perfect time, knowing exactly what Jack had. There was only one way that was possible. Ronan's lips pressed into a thin line. "Jack," he started. Then, a sharp metallic voice echoed from behind them. "Targetes AQ Guiard." Jack whirled around. Enforcer ships were descending from the sky. Ronan stepped back, hands raised. "You weren't supposed to get hurt, kid. I told them to let you live." Jack felt rage boiling inside him. "You son of a..." The enforcers opened fire. The betrayal burns. The world erupted in light and sound. Jack and Korak dove for cover, rolling behind the ruins as energy blasts tore through the stone walls. Dust filled the air. The sky turned red with enforcer searchlights. Ronan stood calmly in the chaos, his face unreadable. Jack felt something inside him snap. "You sold us out," he yelled over the gunfire. Roman's face darkened. "You don't understand, Jack." Jack's fingers tightened on the trigger. "No, I think I do." Ronan shook his head. "If you try to fight them, you die here." Jack gritted his teeth. "Then I guess I die fighting." He spun, fired, and the war began. The final stand. The sky was on fire. Jack ducked behind a crumbling stone wall as Enforcer energy blasts shredded the ruins around him. The night was filled with the roar of engines, the whir of drones, and the heavy thud of armored boots hitting the ground. Korak was beside him, his golden eyes sharp and unwavering, his energy blade pulsing in his grip. And just 20 feet away, standing in the open, untouched by the chaos, was Ronan, the man Jack had once called friend, the man who had betrayed him. Roman's face was unreadable as the Enforcers moved around him, their rifles locking onto Jack and Korak's position. Jack's heart pounded. This was it, the last fight. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to end this. The fight begins. Korak moved first. With a warrior's roar, he leaped from cover, his energy blade slicing through the nearest Enforcer before the soldier even had time to react. Sparks and blood erupted in the air, and Korak was already on the next one, moving like a shadow. Jack forced himself to focus. No more hesitation. He grabbed the rifle from his back, aimed, and fired. The first shot hit an Enforcer square in the chest, sending the armored soldier crashing backward. The second shot caught a drone midair, sending it spiraling into the wreckage. Jack gritted his teeth. "Come on, you bastards," he yelled, ducking as another energy blast whizzed past his head. Korak fought like a beast, cutting through soldiers with deadly precision. But there were too many. For every Enforcer they took down, 3 more arrived. Jack's hands were slick with sweat as he ducked, fired, moved, his body running on pure adrenaline. Then, the earth shook. A deafening hum filled the air. Jack turned and froze. The commander arrives. A new figure descended from the sky, landing with a heavy THUD in the middle of the battlefield. Jack's stomach dropped. This wasn't an ordinary Enforcer. This was something worse. The High Order commander. The figure stood nearly 10 feet tall, encased in obsidian black armor, with glowing red lines running down his limbs. His helmet was smooth, featureless, a cold, faceless executioner. Jack could feel the weight of his presence, a predator staring down its prey. Korak stopped moving. For the first time, Jack saw something rare in the alien warrior's eyes. Fear. The commander's voice was deep, mechanical, emotionless. "The fugitive will die. The scavenger will be erased. The device will be returned." Jack clenched his jaw. "Yeah, well, I've got another idea." He fired his rifle straight at the commander's head. The blast hit point blank and did nothing. The energy rippled across the armor, fading into nothingness. Jack's eyes widened. "Oh, come on." The commander moved faster than anything Jack had ever seen. Before Jack could react, the massive figure lunged, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Jack choked, struggling as the iron grip crushed his windpipe. The commander tilted his head. Weak. Jack's vision blurred. His fingers scrambled for anything. Then, Korak attacked. With a furious battle cry, the alien warrior struck from behind, his energy blade slicing toward the commander's spine. But the commander was ready. Faster than thought, he turned, catching Korak's blade with his bare hand. The energy shattered like glass. Jack's stomach sank. No. The commander's other hand shot forward and pierced straight through Korak's chest. Korak's last stand. Jack's world slowed. Korak's eyes widened, his mouth opening in shock as blackened blood spilled from the wound. The commander ripped his hand back, letting Korak's body slump to the ground. Jack's rage exploded. No, he didn't think. He reacted. Jack grabbed the device from his pocket, the alien chip Korak had given him. The key. The override. The one thing the High Order feared. With his last strength, he jammed it straight into the commander's armor. A pulse rippled through the air. The commander froze. His body shuddered violently. The red lights across his armor flickered. And then, the enforcers collapsed. Every single one. Their bodies shut down instantly, like puppets with their strings cut. Jack fell to his knees, gasping for air. The battlefield was silent. Then, a low, shuddering breath. Jack turned. Korak was still alive. The price of victory. Jack stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside Korak. Hey, big guy, stay with me. Korak coughed weakly, dark blood staining his lips. His golden eyes, once filled with fire, were dimming. You did it, Korak murmured. You stopped them. Jack shook his head. No, you're not dying on me. We made a deal, remember? You fight. I fight. We finish this together. Korak's lips curled into a weak smile. Jack, you were always more than a scavenger. Jack's throat tightened. Don't talk like that, damn it. Korak's breathing slowed. His hand gripped Jack's arm. You are a warrior now. And then, his grip loosened. Jack sat there, his hands covered in alien blood, as the warrior who had once been his enemy died as his friend. The war is not over. Jack didn't move for a long time. The night stretched silent and empty, the High Order forces crippled. But Jack knew. This wasn't over. The High Order was still out there. And now, they would come for him. Jack closed his eyes. He had lost too much. He had killed, fought, bled. He had left the life of a scavenger behind. When he finally stood, his hand steady, his mind clear, he knew one thing. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Jack looked to the stars. I was just a scavenger once. His fingers curled into a fist. Not anymore. And then, with fire in his heart, he walked toward the mountains, toward the next battle, toward war.